You know that strange electric second before you act, the one where your heart taps faster, your mind flashes excuses, and your hand hovers over the decision like it's a live wire? That split second is where your future is negotiated. The promise of your goals is real, but it's trapped behind a door that only opens when you move first. This book is a manual for that exact moment, the micro arena where desire either hardens into action or dissolves into another day of postponing. It argues that discipline isn't a trait you're born with, it's a system you build, one tiny, repeatable decision at a time, until doing the hard thing becomes your brain's default, not its exception. The central thesis is disarmingly simple. Action precedes motivation, not the other way around. Waiting to feel ready chains your results to the weather of your emotions. When you flip the sequence, move first, feel later, you hack the loop. Action creates momentum, momentum creates clarity, clarity creates motivation, and motivation makes the next action easier. The author frames this as the forward loop. It's a kinetic habit. Start ugly, start small, but start now. From there, the book shows how to design your days so that action is the easiest choice, not the hardest. Procrastination, the book argues, is rarely laziness. It is friction plus fear. Friction is the microscopic tax on every step between you and the thing you want to do, the messy desk, the unclear first task, the 12 clicks to open the right file, the phone within arm's reach. Fear is the mind's fast-loading story about possible loss, embarrassment, wasted effort, rejection, failure that becomes identity. The cure is not heroic willpower, but engineering. Remove friction, constrain fear, and make the first move unmistakably doable. The moment you take the first tiny action, your nervous system shifts states, from threat and avoidance to approach and engagement, and the rest of the work rides that wave. The author introduces a deceptively powerful structure called the first domino protocol. Before any meaningful effort, you define a single action that can be done in under 2 minutes, produces visible progress, and makes the next step obvious. Open the document and write 20 words, put on gym shoes and step outside. Start a 5-minute timer and outline the first 3 bullet ideas. The point is not to finish, it's to cross the threshold where identity catches up with behavior. If I am the kind of person who starts, I become the kind of person who continues. This protocol is stapled to another idea. Every task must have a cleared runway. That means your tools are ready, the file is named, the calendar block exists, and the first line of the task is already written down. You remove the invisible sand that grinds the engine. This book relentlessly reframes identity. People wait to act until they believe they are disciplined. The author flips it. Identities are trailing indicators of actions done repeatedly. You don't need to believe you're a runner to run, you need to run to become a runner. With every repetition, the brain tallies votes for who you are. The fastest way to cast votes is frequency over intensity. 1,000 small actions remap your self-image faster than 10 heroic sprints. Thus, the operating rule: make it frequent, make it easy, then make it bigger. The system scales itself because consistency is a compounding asset. A signature tactic here is the countdown go trigger. The human brain hesitates at edges, cold water, tough calls, blank pages. The book directs you to interrupt rumination with a brief count, 3 to 2 to 1, and move your body immediately into the first 2-minute action. The countdown annihilates loops of internal debate. Motion rewires state. You're not negotiating with yourself, you're executing a pre-decided script. The key is to attach the trigger to environments and times. At 8 a.m., at your desk, 3, 2, 1 open the draft. At 5:30 p.m., 3, 2, 1 out the door for a walk. When a difficult message appears, 3, 2, 1 type the first sentence. Over time, this becomes Pavlovian. The countdown equals movement. Implementation intentions form the skeleton of the day. If it's 9 a.m., then I start the report. If I finish lunch, then I walk for 7 minutes. The book emphasizes that intentions must be precise and paired with a visible cue. Place the notebook on the keyboard before bed, set the water bottle on the shoes, put the guitar on the chair you sit in. Vague plans die in the fog of choice. Sharp plans survive contact with distraction. Alongside these, the author promotes pre-commitment locks, actions that make your future action more likely than your future avoidance. Schedule a work sprint with a friend, set a Wi-Fi blocker for the first hour of the day, pay for the class in advance, place the alarm across the room. You reduce reliance on mood by reducing optionality. Energy management is treated as non-negotiable. Willpower is a battery, systems are a power plant. The book pushes 4 pillars: sleep as performance tech, food as neurochemistry, movement as mental clarity, and sunlight as circadian software. The morning prescription is simple: water, light, and motion before screens. The author calls it WLM. A glass of water signals the body you're up. 5 to 10 minutes of daylight tells your brain to start producing alertness, and a short movement series primes your nervous system for focus. Paired with a clear first domino, this yields a predictable, repeatable runway into work, sharpening the start of every day. Focus in this model is manufactured with boundaries and beats. You don't decide to be focused, you schedule a 25 or 50-minute sprint and build a wall around it. The sprint contains one named task, a visible timer, and a public finish. Write 300 words, review 3 datasets, sketch 4 thumbnail ideas. You keep a sidecar notepad for distractions. Every urge to check something gets written down to handle later. When the sprint ends, you exit the seat for 2 to 5 minutes. Stand, sip water, breathe, look far away. The book calls this the tight-loose rhythm, tight on task, loose in recovery. This cadence prevents cognitive drift and sustains quality over hours. Fear and perfectionism are handled via scope collapse. The brain resists starting because it imagines the entire mountain. You shrink the mountain on purpose. Can't write the report. Write a bad report outline with 5 messy bullets. Can't start the video edit. Assemble only the selects. Can't clean the room. Clear only the desk surface. The author insists that quality is an emergent property of quantity. Since you cannot edit what doesn't exist, the only rational path is to produce flawed first drafts quickly. He introduces the ugly first 10 rule. Commit to 10 terrible versions, 10 reps of the riff, 10 sketches, 10 opening paragraphs. Somewhere around rep 5, your brain stops dramatizing and starts iterating. Momentum quietly improves taste. The book's philosophy of emotion is unsentimental. Feelings are signals, not sovereigns. Anxiety signals ambiguity. Guilt signals misalignment. Boredom signals under challenge. You don't wait for these to vanish. You translate them into micro-actions. Ambiguity? Define the next 2 steps. Misalignment? Reconnect to the why in 1 sentence and adjust the task to serve it. Under challenge? Add a constraint. Half the time, half the tools. A stricter word limit. The author suggests a daily 2-minute ritual called Signal to Step. Name the loudest feeling in 1 word, ask what it's signaling, and pick the smallest action that acknowledges it. The action metabolizes the feeling no longer pilots the day. Choice architecture is everywhere in these pages. Your phone lives in a different room while you work. Social media deletes are scheduled like oil changes. The browser opens on a blank tab instead of a home page engineered to hijack attention. Alarms signal transitions, not just wake-ups. The visible environment is curated to be a series of green lights toward your priorities. If something matters, it's set out. If something derails you, it's out of sight. The author repeats a line like a drumbeat. You are not stronger than your context. Design a better context. This isn't a surrender, it's strategy. You spend less time wrestling temptation and more time flowing through prepared paths. Because goals can be abstract, the book leans hard on lead measures, behaviors you can control today that predict outcomes later. Instead of get fit, it's do 30 minutes of Zone 2 cardio 4 times per week. Instead of grow the channel, it's publish 2 shorts and 1 long form weekly. You track the behaviors, not the outcomes. A weekly forward audit checks just 3 things. Did you show up? Did you make progress visible? What is the next ready-to-start version? This keeps your attention where it buys momentum. The audit ends with resetting friction. Name tomorrow's first domino, prep the runway, set the countdown cue. Then you're done. No guilt, no heroics, just continuity. Accountability transforms from shame to shared momentum. The book recommends parallel sprints with a partner. Each person states a single target for the next 50 minutes, works privately, and posts a visible proof of progress at the end. There's no critique during the sprint, only proof and a quick "what's next?" This structure removes the social risk that blocks many people from sharing work and replaces it with light pressure and camaraderie. It also suggests public micro-stakes. If you miss your first daily domino without a legitimate reason, you owe a small, mildly painful payment to a cause you dislike or a friend who will tease you. Stakes sharpen follow-through when motivation dips. Decision paralysis gets a surgical treatment. Most delays aren't deep analysis, they're avoidance dressed as caution. The book offers a good enough threshold. Gather 3 solid data points, set a 5-minute cap, decide, and test in the smallest reversible way. If the decision is high impact and irreversible, do a brief fear setting. Write the worst plausible outcome, 1 prevention, and 1 recovery strategy. Then choose by values, which option aligns with who you're becoming. Action clarifies, hesitation distorts. The author returns often to this line. Decisions are cheap, corrections are cheaper, learning is priceless. Move, measure, and adjust faster than you ruminate. When the work is creative, the book prescribes input fasting before output. For the first hour, you consume nothing, no inbox, no news, no scrolling. You protect the mind's raw material for your own ideas. After you produce, you can tour others' work. This keeps you from second-guessing your voice before it speaks. To handle the inner critic, you separate roles by time, creator in the morning sprint, editor in the afternoon sprint. Trying to create and judge simultaneously is like pressing the gas and brakes with the same foot. The author devotes an entire section to recovering from zero. Life happens, illness, grief, chaos. The danger isn't missing a day, it's making the miss a story about your identity. The book's counter is restart rituals. When you fall off, the next day is a half-volume day. Everything shrinks to half the usual dose. You're not proving anything, you're rebuilding rhythm. The only rule is never miss twice. If you do miss twice, you return with an even smaller domino, 15 seconds of the task if necessary, just to restore the chain. The scoreboard is streaks of starts, not streaks of perfection. There's a refreshing practicality in how the book treats rewards. Dopamine chases progress, not promises. So you make the progress visible, a page count, a tracked sprint, a checked box on the wall calendar. The author calls these beads on a string. Each bead proves you moved. The growing string seduces your brain into keeping it unbroken, but you avoid rewards that contradict the identity you're building. Finish a writing sprint, take a walk, stretch, sip tea. Don't drown in dopamine baths that steal the next hour. Rewards should restore, not derail. The relationship between ambition and peace is handled with nuance. The book doesn't romanticize grind for its own sake. It treats action as a way to live in integrity. You do what you said you would do with the time you actually have, not the time you dream of. That integrity breeds calm because your behavior aligns with your values. From there, ambition becomes cleaner. You pick fewer goals, define them behaviorally, and stop promising yourself the world while delivering crumbs. The result is less dramatic but more dependable. Steady bricks instead of sporadic fireworks. A powerful chapter reframes resistance as a compass. The thing you keep postponing is often the thing that would move your life the farthest. To use that signal, you schedule frogs first. The day's most avoided but meaningful task becomes the first 50-minute sprint, protected by WLM, the countdown, and a cleared runway. You do it before you have time to talk yourself out of it. After you finish, the rest of the day inherits that momentum. Even if chaos arrives, you've already banked a result that matters. Over weeks, this practice reweights your life toward the important rather than the urgent. The book also shows how to scale action from personal to team contexts. In groups, ambiguity multiplies. The fix is ruthless clarity. One owner per task, a visible deadline, and a definition of done that's written before work begins. Meetings start with the desired artifact, we leave with a one-page plan, and end with owners and dates captured in writing. Feedback separates content from status. Critique the work, not the person. Teams adopt sprint walls, 3 to 5 shared priorities only, and protect focus time with no meeting mornings. The same principles apply: cleared runways, first dominoes, visible proof. On days when nothing works, your brain fogs, your emotions spike, the book prescribes micro-win ladders. Start with the smallest controllable win. Drink water, open curtains, make the bed. Write one messy sentence, answer one email you've been avoiding. Each rung is designed to be impossible to refuse. 10 minutes later, the day looks different because you look different. Motion begets motion, and the weather inside your head clears just enough to handle the next thing. The author's refrain returns: you don't wait to feel like it. You build feeling through doing. Crucially, the book teaches you to end days correctly. The shutdown step takes 7 minutes. Log what moved, name one lesson, and write tomorrow's first domino in a sentence. Close the loops that keep your brain half open all evening. This gentle ritual tells your nervous system the day is complete. Sleep comes easier, mornings start quieter, and the cumulative effect is that your life acquires chapters, clear starts and finishes, rather than one long smear of half-done tasks. If there's philosophy underneath the tactics, it's this: your life is the sum of decisions made at thresholds, the threshold between bed and floor, between open and closed document, between thinking and typing, between wanting and dialing the phone. The world rewards those who cross thresholds early and often, even clumsily, because each crossing enlarges the space where you can create, contribute, and become someone you're proud of. You don't need to become fearless. You need to become skilled at moving while a little afraid. You don't need to vanish excuses. You need to outrun them for 2 minutes over and over until they stop keeping up. By the end, forcing yourself to take action no longer feels like force. It feels like choreography. You flood the morning with cues that trigger motion. You use the countdown to interrupt hesitation. You collapse scope to barbarically easy first steps. You protect sprints and recharge deliberately. You attach small stakes where you need extra grip. You keep identity tethered to what you do today, not what you once did or hope to do someday. And you forgive yourself quickly so you can begin again quickly. It's less about heroic surges and more about ordinary starts that never stop. The future vision is plain. Imagine stacking 2 or 3 meaningful actions daily, indifferent to mood, for a year. That's 700 decisions that used to die in the doorway, now executed cleanly. That's a book drafted, a business launched, a body rebuilt, a portfolio strengthened, a family rhythm stabilized, a mind that trusts itself. The book doesn't promise ease, it promises agency. It hands you switches you can actually flip when the screen inside your head loads yet another reason to wait. So when the next moment comes, and it will in the next hour, treat it as a test you are ready to pass. Clear the runway. Count down. Move your body. Do the first 2 minutes. Close the loop. Breathe. Do the next 2 minutes. Let the movement teach your mind what it means to want something and meet it with action. That is how you become the kind of person who gets things done, not by thinking about it more beautifully, but by doing it more often, sooner, smaller, and with less drama. The life you want sits one tiny, unglamorous start beyond the hesitation you've rehearsed. Step through and let the future collect the interest on today's simple, courageous choice. No, continuing the summary with deeper, highly actionable material that expands the book's core systems into day-by-day choreography you can actually run. The operating picture for a high-action life starts before dawn decisions ever arrive. The night before is where tomorrow's inertia is set. The author treats evenings like a small factory that builds frictionless mornings. Pack the bag, lay out clothes, stage your tools, write the exact first sentence you'll type, place the water bottle on your desk, put your phone in another room with a dumb alarm clock ready. A single index card ends the day. One line for the most meaningful frog, one line for the first 2-minute action, one line for why it matters to your identity now. This tiny ritual shuts the loop and quiets the mind's background tabs so sleep can do what caffeine never will, refill the system that permits action without theatrics. Morning, then, is not a vibe, it is a sequence. Water resets the body, light resets the clock, motion resets the mood. Even a 2-minute mobility flow unknots the nervous system and hands your mind a vote of competence. You step into the chair and obey the card, count down, cross the threshold, and create the smallest proof of progress possible. The outcome is not finish the chapter, but be the kind of person who starts at the stated time. When that identity becomes reliable, production multiplies because the war over beginnings is already won. The day's shape becomes a chain of short, decisive crossings rather than a swamp of aimless intention. The book is ruthless about separating planning from performing. Planning is quiet and happens once. Performing is noisy and happens in sprints. During planning, you choose one spotlight project per week and 3 no matter what outputs tied to it. During performing, you stop renegotiating and simply run the sprints that make those outputs inevitable. This prevents the common productivity tragedy, elaborate systems that cannibalize the time they were meant to protect. Ambition gets expressed as scheduled behavior, not as a bulleted fantasy. Because the plan already exists, you can afford to ignore moods. Because the plan is small, you can afford to finish. One of the book's most liberating reframes is that action beats accuracy at takeoff. Most beginnings don't require precision, they require propulsion. The author calls this thrust over trim. When a plane accelerates down the runway, nobody is micro-tuning winglets. They're committing to speed. In creative work, thrust is ugly drafts. In business, thrust is testing a tiny offer with real people. In fitness, thrust is the first 10 minutes of movement, even if the routine is imperfect. Trim, refining, optimizing, perfecting comes after momentum exists. You don't get points for planning a flawless first step you never take. You get leverage from steps you actually take. Fear often hides in complexity. The brain inflates a task into an unsolvable hydra and then uses that image to justify delay. The fix is decomposition to action atoms. You keep breaking the task until an atom appears that can be done without thinking. If revise the deck is sticky, decompose into open deck, duplicate as V2, Write 10 slide headlines as one-liners. If call the client feels heavy, decompose into draft 3 bullet points, paste into an email stub, type their name in the address bar. At each decomposition, you ask, would I refuse to do this if it took 90 seconds? When the answer becomes no, you've found your atom. Count down and do it. The atom always generates the next one because realities reveal themselves only in motion. Because attention is a scarce resource, the author treats it like a budget. Most people overspend on low-return clicks and underinvest in high-return creation. The book proposes a daily maker's tax allocation. The first 90 to 120 minutes of the day are reserved for moving the spotlight project's concrete outputs forward, off-grid from inputs. Messages, feeds, and favors are handled later in clerical clusters, short windows where you batch shallow work so it cannot fracture your deeper work. This design protects that fragile, bright kind of focus where quality and speed coincide. It is not glamorous, but it is repeatable, which is rarer and more valuable. Identity friction is addressed with narrative engineering. The mind thrives on stories. If you don't supply one, it invents one, usually dramatic and unhelpful. The book asks you to author a compact narrative that explains why showing up matters now. Not someday, not abstractly, now. 2 sentences suffice. First sentence, the future you are actively building in present tense. Second sentence, the behavior today that proves it. I am a maker who ships useful ideas every week. Today I write 300 words before noon, no matter what. Read it aloud before the first sprint. It sounds simplistic. It is deliberately so. Complexity coddles avoidance. Simplicity punctures it. When the emotional weather turns, the book doesn't ask you to overpower it. It asks you to root around it using state switches, a 5-breath box pattern, a brisk walk, a 1-song dance, a cold face splash. These are tiny parasympathetic levers that shift physiology without debate. You pair a switch with an atomized task and run them as a bundle. Switch, atom, proof. In 5 minutes, you're no longer negotiating with a storm. You're standing in light rain, already moving. The lesson repeats. You do not need to win your feelings to win your day. You need to interrupt them long enough to act once. The book has sharp tools for social resistance. If your environment disrespects your commitments, your action rate will suffer, even if you believe in yourself loudly. 2 upgrades fix most of this. The first is public tiny stakes. Declare a micro-deliverable to one person for a precise time window and promise to send a screenshot or file. The second is peer parallelism. Work alongside someone virtually or in person, each running private sprints but sharing proofs afterward. Neither requires vulnerability or genius. Both create just enough pressure to pierce hesitation. Over months, these light structures do more than heroic solitary vows. Decision friction, left unchecked, rots momentum. The author therefore imposes a default posture: decide to act small and soon. You can revisit the path after you've gathered one new piece of reality from the attempt. This posture only fails for irreversible, high-risk choices, and the book gives a micro-protocol for those. Define the worst plausible outcome, list one prevention move, list one repair move, and decide by values within a short window. You replace angst with guardrails. The world tends to reward people who learn quickly by doing. This model ensures you qualify. The relationship between clarity and courage is handled with care. You might think you need more courage, but often you need clearer constraints. The brain is braver when the sandbox is visible. The author suggests constraints for confidence: a time box, a page limit, a tool limit, a rule like no backspace for the first 10 minutes. Constraints metabolize fear into focus. They also create repeatable recipes, the way a chef reaches for a favorite pan and ratio without drama. When you act inside recipes, beginnings are greased, and your creative energy can be spent on the work's substance rather than its setup. Recovery is not indulgence, it is infrastructure. The book's model of sustainable action uses short oscillations. After a 25-50-minute sprint, leave the seat. Look far into the distance to relax eye muscles. Inhale slowly through the nose, long exhale through the mouth to trigger calm. Shake the hands and jaw to dissipate tension. Sip water, 2 to 5 minutes. This looks trivial, it is chemical. Without these micro breaks, cognitive performance decays and the story "I can't focus today" writes itself. With them, afternoons retain power and evenings do not cannibalize tomorrow. When the stakes are public, presentations, launches, exams, the book favors rehearsal that respects the brain's encoding rules. Rehearse in the environment or as close as possible. Rehearse at the time of day you'll perform if you can. Rehearse under timed constraints. Rehearse the opener repeatedly until it is embodied. The opener controls state. Rehearse the crumple plan. What you'll do if a slide fails, if a demo freezes, if a question stumps you. Knowing your recovery script halves performance anxiety and doubles the odds you'll take bold action when it counts. The author explores habit relapse with unusual compassion. You are not a machine. You are a human who will wobble. The point is not to avoid wobble, but to shorten it. The relapse protocol has 3 lines. Name it without drama, shrink the next action to absurd ease, and rebuild streaks of starts. Shame elongates slumps, curiosity shortens them. People who act consistently aren't better at willpower, they're better at restarting. They carry restart rituals like spare keys. A subtle but powerful practice threads the entire book. Make progress physically visible in your space. A tally mark for sprints done. Sticky notes that migrate from doing to done. A chain of beads or paper clips that lengthens after each proof. Human brains are ancient. They love objects and movement. When your environment performs your progress back to you, funk lifts. This matters on hard weeks when your subjective sense of accomplishment lags reality. The wall says you moved, you trust the wall, you move again. For creative pros who fear judgment, the book offers a right of exposure. Publish something small on a cadence so frequent your nervous system becomes bored of fear. A sketch every day, a paragraph every weekday, a 60-second clip each Tuesday and Friday. You're not chasing virality, you're teaching your body that sharing is safe. Once you decouple shipping from drama, you become capable of daring work because you've built the muscle of public motion without attaching your worth to every piece. This is how action scales from private habits to public impact. On relationships and collaboration, the author insists that clarity is kindness. Ask for what you need in verbs and times, not in vibes and hopes. Offer the same to others. When a teammate misses, recalibrate process, not character. Put definitions of done in writing before work begins. Replace ASAP with a specific window. When the shared environment contains fewer ambiguous promises, everyone acts faster because nobody is spending their day decoding one another's intentions. Money decisions, often paralyzing, are reframed as sequences of reversible experiments. Start by taking one tiny, boring action with asymmetric upside, automate a small transfer, raise prices for one product variant to test elasticity, run a micro ad with a cap you can afford. Action produces feedback that analysis cannot. Your financial life advances not by the perfect plan but by 1,000 modest tests that teach you how your world actually responds. Fear shrinks because uncertainty shrinks. Uncertainty shrinks because you keep touching reality. Health is approached as a platform for courageous work, rather than a separate project that competes with it. The book prescribes minimum effective doses that remove the excuse of time, a brisk daily walk, 3 brief strength sessions per week emphasizing compound movements, consistent sleep boundaries, protein and produce at each main meal, light in the morning, darkness before bed. None of this is novel, all of it is potent because it's doable. Action is easier in a body that's not starved, inflamed, or chronically underslept. There is a chapter that might be the book's most humane: acting while sad. The author does not deny grief, heartbreak, or fatigue. He offers a gentler ladder for those days. Start with the basics: wash face, make bed, drink water, open curtains. Name one obligation that protects a future you care about. Reduce it to a comically small atom. Do only that, then stop and breathe. If capacity appears, do the next atom. The aim is not victory, it is dignity. Even a single atom on a dark day preserves the story "I can be trusted," and that story makes brighter days far more productive. When your goals are big and distant, the book suggests picking a short horizon contract. For the next 2 weeks, you'll behave like the person who already owns the outcome. This is not manifestation, it's rehearsal. You decide the 3 behaviors that would be unavoidable if the outcome were true, and you perform them before you deserve them. You let the identity lead the results, rather than postponing identity until results arrive. 2 weeks is short enough to commit fiercely and long enough to alter momentum. When the contract ends, you renew or revise. Action compounds because identity hardens. Tools help, but the book warns against fetishizing them. Switch apps rarely, switch behaviors often. Keep one capture system, one calendar, one focus timer, one single source of weekly truth. Simplicity lowers the temperature of starting. If tinkering with systems becomes a procrastination hobby, impose a rule. Tools may be changed only on Fridays for 30 minutes with a written reason. The work is the work. Tools are buses to the work. The point is to arrive and do reps, not to tour buses. If you struggle with saying no, a main artery of avoided action, the author gives a 3-line script that closes the loop without guilt. Thank them sincerely. Decline clearly. Offer the smallest helpful alternative you can afford. This preserves relationships while protecting your spotlight project. Every yes has an invisible cost. Action pays those costs. You cannot run a high-action life while auditioning for everyone else's approval. Respectfully refusing is an action that creates time for the actions only you can do. Finally, the book brings you back to thresholds, the sacred site of decision. Each threshold crossed deposits a coin in a jar labeled self-trust. That jar is the real fortune you're building. People with full jars act boldly because they expect themselves to follow through. People with empty jars act anxiously because their past makes ambushes feel likely. There is one reliable way to fill the jar: show up for the small promises immediately in front of you. Do it without ceremony. Do it when bored. Do it when scared. Do it again tomorrow. Over months, you'll look up and discover that action is no longer a negotiation, it's your native language. So the manual resolves into something almost embarrassingly clear. Prepare the runway tonight. Trigger the start with a countdown. Collapse scope until the first move is weightless. Protect short, tight sprints with off-grid attention. Make progress physically visible. Use state switches to route around moods. Rehearse exposure until sharing is dull. Recover in measured pulses. Restart without drama. Decide fast for small things and by values for big things. Say no with kindness but firmness. Treat identity as a lagging metric and cast votes for it hourly. Not once, not someday, but today, in the next 5 minutes, across the next threshold you've avoided. Action first, clarity next, pride last. Repeated until you don't remember how to live any other way. Not yet. Here's more, deeper, denser, and even more practical, so you can run this playbook in real life without waiting for motivation to show up. Imagine each day as a narrow bridge with crosswinds of distraction. The book's promise is that you don't need to tame the wind. You only need handrails you can grip without thinking. One rail is pre-commitment, the other is micro-execution. Pre-commitment happens the night before when you stage the scene like a set designer, the document already titled and open to a blank line, the headphones coiled on the keyboard, the water within reach, the phone physically exiled. Micro-execution begins the instant you arrive. 3 deep, steady breaths, a tiny countdown, and your fingers move. You're not starting work. You're typing the first raw sentence, hitting export on yesterday's cut, putting the first dish in the sink, opening the invoice template. The book's stance is relentless. Small, visible movement is the ignition that lights everything else. Underneath the tactics is a quiet reframe of courage. The author argues that courage isn't a burst of heat, it's temperature control. You don't try to burn with bravery, you keep the flame steady with repeatable moves that are immune to mood. Your nervous system learns that crossing thresholds is safe because you repeatedly cross small ones with no drama. Safety accumulates. After a month of clean starts, you approach bigger thresholds with less adrenaline and more craft because your body expects follow-through instead of ambush. Clarity, the book insists, is a service you provide to your future self. Vague goals are heavy, specific behaviors are light. The move is to translate every abstract aim into a concrete rhythm. If you want to become a consistent creator, you publish on 2 predictable days and design your week backwards from that fact. If health matters, you book 3 short strength sessions like immovable appointments, and you protect morning light as non-negotiable. If money growth matters, you stack 1 prospecting block and 1 product improvement block daily, protected from inbox turbulence. Rhythm beats intensity because rhythm survives ordinary chaos. Intensity, on the other hand, is a holiday romance with your ambition that fizzles when the weather changes. The author spends time on the architecture of focus because most people try to concentrate with a brain full of open loops. The fix is a 2-minute loop purge before a deep sprint. Write down every unresolved tug, messages to send, tabs to read, errands to schedule, so your mind can release them. Then you deliberately shrink the work to a single verb. Not finish the chapter, but draft the opener. Not clean the apartment, but clear the desk surface. This is not self-trickery, it is respectful design. The brain is a prediction machine. When it can clearly predict the first 2 minutes, it stops ringing alarms about the next 2 hours. Fear of judgment receives a gentle but firm antidote: low-stakes shipping. You ship small pieces so often that sharing becomes boring. Boredom is the goal because boring is safe, and the nervous system greenlights what feels safe. A daily paragraph, a sketch, a short clip, a micro-demo to a friendly user. Each is a rehearsal for larger, scarier launches. The book leans on a truth seasoned performers know. Confidence is not the absence of nerves, it's proof that you've survived this feeling many times and can still deliver. You're not building swagger, you're building receipts. When you stall, you don't interrogate your character, you interrogate friction. The book turns you into a detective who looks for tiny, repeatable snags. Is the desk visually noisy so the brain never relaxes? Is the project folder a mess so the first 5 minutes are scavenger hunts? Is the timer app fiddly so you burn willpower before you begin? You fix these once and reclaim dozens of starts. One reader called this taking stones out of the runway. It's unglamorous work that multiplies output more reliably than inspirational pep talks. Relationships often decide whether your action life thrives. The book offers simple language for hard boundaries that preserve focus without poisoning goodwill. You learn to say thanks and decline in one breath, to suggest a small alternate that doesn't mortgage your priorities, to propose specific windows instead of the anxiety-inducing whenever works. In teams, you advocate for definitions of done written before work begins, for single owners and visible deadlines, for no meeting mornings, so makers can actually make. This is not prickliness, it is mercy. People move faster when ambiguity is low and promises are narrow. Energy, Your ability to pay attention without resenting it is protected by a handful of rules that travel well across seasons. Mornings begin with light, water, and a few minutes of movement before screens. Afternoons get a deliberate trough, a short walk, a stretch, quiet breathing. Evenings dim lights and reduce inputs to guard tomorrow's clarity. Food is boring and kind, protein and produce, steady hydration, caffeine with intention, alcohol, rarely, because it steals tomorrow. Sleep is defended with consistent boundaries and a gentle wind down. These aren't moral stances, they are engineering choices that increase the probability you'll do the thing you said you would do when the clock says it's time. On days that explode, emergencies, surprises, fatigue, the book's gentle ladder saves the streak. You pick one keystone action so small it feels almost silly, 10 ugly sentences, 1 set of push-ups, 3 outreach notes. You do it to keep the chain of starts unbroken. The outcome barely matters. The identity matters immensely. People who move through life with calm momentum are not people who always have perfect days. They are people who always create a sliver of proof on imperfect days. That proof is like a lighthouse that keeps your boat off the rocks in bad weather. A powerful thread examines the difference between motion and action. Motion is preparation disguised as progress, researching, outlining, comparing tools forever. Action touches reality, asking for the sale, posting the draft, shipping the prototype, pressing record, entering the gym. Motion is easier to brag about because it sounds smart. Action is easier to respect because it changes your world. The book urges you to ask a simple diagnostic question each time you sit down. Will the thing I'm doing create a result someone else can see or use within this block of time? If not, you are probably floating in motion. Nudge yourself toward action with a tiny, testable deliverable. The craft of decision-making returns with practical constraints. You treat small, reversible choices like doorways to walk through quickly so you can explore the room. You treat big choices like windows to look through briefly and decide by values after you have written the worst plausible case and your prevention and repair moves. You replace analysis paralysis with analysis cadence. Gather, write, choose, test, learn. You buy your wisdom with lived experiments instead of hypothetical debates. The book delights in constraints because they unlock creativity and speed. You might ban backspace for your first 10 minutes of writing. You might limit a design to 1 font and 2 shapes. You might give yourself permission to produce only a faithful draft on the first pass. No flourishes, no cleverness, only clarity. These constraints reduce the ego's desire to dazzle and free the worker's desire to deliver. With less judgment at the start, more work appears. With more work, your taste has something to shape. With shape, quality emerges. If you've ever felt like you can't be consistent because life is loud, the book offers a weekly spine that bends without breaking. You choose a single spotlight project and 3 visible outputs for that week. Mornings are reserved for that project's sprints. Midday handles admin in batches. Late afternoons, house meetings or collaboration. Evenings are off-ramps, not trapdoors back into work. The spine doesn't demand perfection, it demands protection. When chaos intrudes, you defend 1 sprint and 1 output. That single defense often salvages the week because momentum cares more about continuity than volume. The author emphasizes emotional alchemy, turning noisy feelings into useful fuel. Anxiety becomes an instruction to make a plan and a small prevention step. Annoyance becomes a cue to strengthen a boundary or simplify a process. Envy becomes a map to a desire you've been hiding from yourself and a tiny experiment toward it. Even shame gets translated into a repair move that restores alignment rather than spiraling into self-attack. This translation happens in writing fast, so the feeling doesn't colonize your day. Finally, the book returns to the most ordinary miracle in the whole system, the power of one honest start. You look at the task you've danced around. You set the physical scene, so the first move is unavoidable. You count down softly with your breath. You move. For 2 quiet minutes, you collect proof that you are a person who acts. Then you do a little more, and a little more, until the hour is gone and the thing exists where nothing existed before. You close the loop for the day by recording the proof and setting tomorrow's first move. This doesn't make headlines. It makes lives. Action first. Feeling next. Identity last. Repeat until the bridge you're crossing becomes wide, familiar, and yours.